All right, let me get this recording. Good morning, everybody. Go ahead and get Canvas open. We are starting Module 2, Lesson 2, Executive Powers. As I said, I'm going to be moving a little bit faster than normal today because then when we meet again for our second day of the week, it's stuff. We want to get the notebook finished up because we have a project this week, superhero project, all right? And it's actually a pretty fun project, but I want to have time in class to go over it. So that means we got to be super productive and kind of move a little bit faster than we normally move. Okay, so do your best to stick with me because when I have to repeat myself, that obviously slows us down. All right, so the learning intention, what we're focusing on the executive branch. We want to understand the powers and the role of the U.S. president, both foreign and domestic. Okay, last week we talked about, right, the legislative branch. So we're looking at the three branches last week, this week, and next week. So last week it was the Congress, right, the legislative branch, so the House and the Senate. And their major responsibilities are making laws, power of the purse, right? Approving taxes. They approve treaties. Anyone that the president appoints, they have to approve. So they have a lot of power. So now we're going to the executive branch, okay? This is the president, pretty much centers around the president and the people who serve the president, all right? And the role of the president. So it is not an all-powerful position. So we're gonna be looking at what are the powers of the president, how are those powers shared, and how do they work with the legislative and the judicial? And then next week, we'll look at the third branch, which is the judicial. A couple of reminders, making sure that you're sticking with the pace, right? I do those Monday, Friday announcements anytime we have school, showing what's due, what's past due, when things are closing. So make sure you're checking those. I also send an email at the end of each week. If you have missing assignments, it shows as a 0, okay? Because there's no longer a minimum 50%. If an assignment has closed, it is closed because I already extended it, right? I already did 2 weeks. So there is no extra opportunity. You already had double the late policy, all right? Progress grades came out. So make sure that you looked at Infinite Campus. If you've done work since then the grade is going to change, okay? The progress grade is just like every other time, right? It's just a report in the middle of the quarter to make sure, hey, everybody, let's make sure that we're on track. Senior Picture Day is coming up and stuff. So it is a little less than 2 weeks. It is the 25th. So if you are wanting to get senior pictures done, have something nice in the yearbook online or something like that, anytime between 8 and 2 at NVLA. Okay. And then SATs are coming up. So there's 2 dates where you can take the SAT. So if you're looking at schools that maybe want the SAT, and stuff, or a lot of schools will take SAT or ACT if you're applying for college. But the SAT is a great opportunity. So the SAT is being offered on November 4th. Let me see what day of the week that is. I'm guessing these are probably weekends. Yeah, so that's a Saturday. And then December 2nd, which I know I'm pretty sure is a Saturday as well. Let me look. Yes, so both of those are Saturdays. So if you're wanting to sign up for the SAT, you have to sign up by for the 4th, and you got to register by the 5th of October. And then if you want to take the one in December, you got to sign up basically a month before, okay, by November. Any questions on any of this? Okay, we're going to keep going just because of time. Like I said, we're going to move a little bit faster today so that we can get to and talk about as much of the executive branch today, tomorrow, and then the project is about kind of playing off of that and having some fun with the executive power, all right, and kind of getting to interpret that in a new way. All right, so let's jump over into Canvas. We'll get that open, all right. So once you're in Canvas, you're going to go into your shell, modules, and we're in Module 2, Lesson 2. Okay, so remember we finished Module 1, so when I'm done with that, I like to close it, makes it a little bit faster. Remember, you can always go to the lesson and recording page. It has any links from class, and this is where I post videos from class. Okay, so if you have to go back and rewatch something. So last week we looked at the legislative process, the legislative branch, and how the House and the Senate, one is based on state population. The House, the Senate is based, everyone is the same. 435 members in the House, 100 members of the Senate, and what that lawmaking process looks like. So this week we're looking at the executive branch. Okay, so again, our supporting question, our intention, what are the powers and limitations of the President of the United States? You know, what can they do? What can they not do? All right, and go ahead and click on the link. You're going to open up your notebook. once it's open, remember the two things that we do every time. You're going to save it to your Google Drive, save it to your government folder. You should have a government folder that we set up at the beginning of the year, and then make it shareable, right? So there in the right-hand corner, anyone with the link, and that way when you submit it, I can open it. Obviously, if you don't, then that makes it kind of hard, right? Then I have to ask you to resubmit it. You get irritated and the world goes round, okay? Okay, give me a thumbs up once you have your notebook open, you've saved it, it's shareable, you're ready to go. Like I said, the more you can be with me, that would be great. We're going to move a little bit faster if we can, because then tomorrow I want to be able to go over and have at least 30 minutes to talk about the project, go over the project to make sure that you feel good about it and you know what you need to do. Okay, and we're in module 2, lesson 2. Ready, awesome. I was like, read. I was like, okay, we're gonna read. Awesome, thank you. All right, let's jump back over then into Canvas. All right. So our supporting question, all right, that we're going to put in number 1. So this is the whole focus that by the end of the lesson, by the end of tomorrow and doing the project, if you want to be able to answer. What are the powers? You want to be able to list, what are some of the powers that the president can have? What are some of the limitations? Because remember, the president is not a dictator. The president is not all powerful, and we want it that way. We don't want one person abusing power and taking us down a bad path, okay? And what role do they serve? All right, so we're going to copy and paste this. I'll put this in the chat, and you can put this in number 1. Whoa, helicopters went right over my house. All right. Maybe it's the president coming to visit me. Don't talk about me like that. I'm like, I didn't say anything bad. Okay, that was kind of funny. Kind of funny. What are the powers, limitations, and roles of the United States president? So copy and paste, and you put that in number 1. I didn't even get a laugh. Wow, I got to work on my stand-up routine, don't I? Thank you, Drea. I appreciate the moral support. Thank you, Sarah. Did you guys hear about all the schools closing today? There's like 5 or 6 that closed today. Things are getting dicey. Yeah. It's a bit of war between the superintendent and the teachers. So it's definitely... It is. I don't like seeing schools close, so I definitely understand that. But I also I know the game that the superintendent is playing, and it's sad because he's not taking it seriously. So he's kind of pushing us. You can only push people so far. So yes, I really want it just to resolve. We all just want it to resolve 100%. Because again, that is what's best for the kids. So, all right, let's keep going. And let's look at the vocab. All right, so there's 5 key vocab words. Prerogative, entrench, pardon, bureaucracy, and entrust. Okay, so let me pull up my thing. Okay, so again, we put the context clue on one side, and then just kind of in layman's terms or in general terms, then how would we define it? Okay, so when the executive powers is something associated with the prerogative power, the courts have justified that the president does have some inherent power. So exclusive power. There are some powers that the president has that is exclusive. So being president, you are very powerful. You are not all powerful, but you do have, it is the most powerful position. So it's like, you're, no matter what, any position of office, imagine it's like a rope tied around your waist, okay? President just has a longer rope than everybody else. You know what I mean? And stuff. So yes, they have more powers than everybody else, but they don't have total freedom, right? And stuff. Yes, exactly. Top of the board. But again, we don't want a dictatorship. Those in favor of term limits argue that to ensure long-serving politicians do not hold office indefinitely, therefore do not become entrenched in the system and lose touch with ordinary people. So a lot of people feel like in both parties, Because right now in the House and the Senate, there's no term limits. So there's some people that have served 30, 40 years. We have some people now that literally like wheelchairs can barely get into the position. And people kind of feel like at a certain point, maybe you shouldn't be there that long. Maybe we should be allowing for younger representation to get in. They get reelected, but are they really fit to serve? Like at what point or how long? So that's definitely been an argument, especially lately, I'd say, you know, how long are people serving, and do we have sometimes where people don't know when to walk away, you know, when it's time to retire and take it easy, go play golf or go hang out or go do your vacations. You know, you don't need to keep serving at a certain point. Leave it for the younger generations. Okay. Pardoning power. So the president does have the ability to pardon. So that literally means to excuse, to basically get someone off for a crime, as if a crime never occurred. The only one they can't do it for is impeachment. So treason, murder, robbery, like pretty much any crime, presidents do have the power to pardon, which means if you're in prison for the rest of your life, they could pardon you and you could get out, technically. Now, it's hard to get that done. And let's argue in a lot of cases, we don't want that to happen. If someone's committed a terrible crime, like we would like them to, you know, serve their time or to be safe from society and stuff. But there are cases where, yep, they can be pardoned. Such cabinet offices as the Attorney General or Secretary of Defense serve a crucial link between the offices of the presidency and mass bureaucracy of the executive branch. So there's tons. Yeah, so every president, when they leave, every president pardons people. It's like the ritual of leaving office. So every president, including President Trump, President Biden will do it someday if he leaves this session or next session. I don't know if he'll be reelected and stuff. Obama, every president pardons people. A lot of them tend to happen though at the end of the presidency because they're done, right? So it doesn't really matter how people feel about it and stuff. So because sometimes it's controversial who they pardon. Sometimes it's agreed, sometimes it's controversial. So there's a lot of executive agencies. There are literally millions of people that work for the government. So what we need is we need cabinet members, okay, that represent each kind of branch to go to the president, work with the president, and then go back and carry that out in those departments, okay? So like Department of Transportation, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, Department of Health, you know, there's of transportation. There's department for all different kinds of things, taking care of the roads, immigration, you know, healthcare, you know, education. And the president can't visit all of those. So what happens is the president appoints people for every single branch, and then they come and they do business with him and discuss, and then they carry out his wishes. They go back to their departments and they carry out those wishes. Because the bureaucracy it's another term for just the hundreds of thousands of people working there. And it's, you know, that's a lot of people to manage. The executive branch is extremely large. Article 2, Section 3, further entrust the president with the power to receive ambassadors, commission U.S. officers, and take care of the laws, or to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So again, it's just kind of acknowledging the responsibility that's given to the executive branch. And of the three branches, they are given the most power. So the given responsibilities, they are the figurehead, so to speak. So without being a monarch, they are our figurehead, right? When we think of Britain, we think of the king or the queen, right? We've thought of Queen Elizabeth for a long time. Now it's King Charles. So we tend to kind of see them as the figurehead, whether or not they have power. We don't have a monarch here. So when we think of who's the figure, who represents us, when you think of the United States, that usually is then the president, right? That's the highest buck. That's the biggest honor. If you're going to meet somebody in the United States, it doesn't get any more important, right, than the presidency or whoever holds that office. Okay, while you finish that up, I'm going to show you this cute video. It's that this was made during President Obama's administration. So it's a little bit older, but they literally wrap through all the presidents. All right, so let's just watch this really quick. It's cute. And you can finish the vote.
George Washington. Washington is called the father of the nation. John Adams passed treachery legislation. The famous Thomas Jefferson bought Louisiana. Under James Madison, War of 1812 began. And the Monroe Doctrine was by James Monroe. John Quincy Adams built canals that flow. Know that Andrew Jackson led the common man's cause. Martin Van Buren shunned war at all costs. Lost William Harrison, he died in bed. So then John Tyler filled in instead. Presidents, presidents, whom have we picked to be presidents, presidents? Let's see, throughout America's history, who's made it into the presidency? James Polk was an underdog, first dark horse. Zachary Taylor elected cause he fought in wars. California admitted by Millard Fillmore. Franklin Pierce on a law book, his oath he swore. Moreover, James Buchanan saw the state seceding. Abraham Lincoln brought slaves to freedom. Believe Andrew Johnson bought Alaskan land. Ulysses Grant granted votes to every last good man. Disbanded post-war Reconstruction Rutherford Hayes. James Garfield assassinated after 90 days. Presidents, presidents, whom have we picked to be presidents, presidents? Let's see, throughout America's history, who's made it into the presidency? The song continues on, did you think that it was over? Chester Arthur, Postal Service bribery he smoldered. Grover Cleveland vetoed more bills than most. Benjamin Harrison narrowly won his votes. Throw a toast to Grover, he gained victory again. William McKinley killed by a gunman. One friend of the environment was Teddy Roosevelt. William Taft, income tax what he most developed. Hoped to build the League of Nations, that was Woodrow Wilson. Warren Harding had a cabinet that scandals spilled from. Presidents, presidents, whom have we picked to be presidents, presidents? Let's see, throughout America's history, who's made it into the presidency? Calvin Coolidge wiped away the nation's debt. But then came depression, much to Herbert Hoover's threat. Yet Franklin Roosevelt, new jobs he created. Harry Truman's usage of the bomb was much debated. An interstate highway system made by Dwight Eisenhower. John Kennedy defied Soviet missile power. For our Civil Rights Act, we can thank Lyndon Johnson. Richard Nixon resigned to Watergate involvement. On to Gerald Ford, the appointee to replace him. Jimmy Carter pardoned those accused of draft evasion. Presidents, presidents, whom have we picked to be presidents, presidents? Let's see, throughout America's history, who's made it into the presidency? When Ronald Reagan spoke, he restored the nation's pride. George H. Bush in the Gulf War, he thrived. To the sky under Bill Clinton surged the economy. George W. Bush formed Homeland Security. You see, Barack Obama wants change to come along, but maybe one day it'll be your name in the song. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Adams, Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison, Tyler, then Polk. Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, Johnson, Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, McKinley, Roosevelt, Taft, Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, and then Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. Presidents, presidents, whom have we picked to be presidents, presidents? Let's see, throughout America's history, who's made it into the presidency? Presidents, presidents, whom have we picked to be presidents, presidents? Let's see.
Okay, cute, right? Like it's so obviously then we've after this was made about about 10 years ago and stuff. So it's just so obviously we had President Trump and then we have our current president, President Biden and stuff. So cute though. All right. So let's start looking. We're going to move in our in Canvas. Sorry, I'm brain freezing here. Okay, so go to the next page and we're going to see executive branch, executive powers, cabinet, and relationship to Congress. Okay, so we're going to start on the first tab, executive branch. What are the powers of the executive branch? Okay, so let's look at the two questions that we need to answer. Why does Hamilton argue that the president would not have elective monarchy or would not be an elective monarchy? What are his arguments against this? All right. He says that the president would be elected and not an inherent position. The president has a system of checks and balances in the legislature. Many things the president does needs approval by the Senate and or Congress. Okay. So a big fear, like we talked about when they were writing the Constitution, a big fear of a lot of anti-federalists, so people who didn't want a large federal government, is they didn't want another monarchy. And they were afraid if we create a presidency, it would just be another version of that. You might call it something different, but it's the same idea, okay? That once they're in, you can't get them out. So he was trying to make it really clear, no, like this position is elected, they can be removed and they're not all powerful. You know, their power is limited. what they can and cannot do. They have checks and balances. So let's take a look at a few of those. So the length of term, they can't serve for life. Okay, so having restrictions, how long they can serve and how often they would have to be reelected. Ability to be removed from office. So remember, Congress, the House and the Senate can impeach the president. They are commander-in-chief, so they are over the military. They have pardoning power, so they can pardon people for crimes. They can influence regulations with foreign relations. So the president tends to negotiate big term deals, but those have to be approved by Congress. So the president can't just go make a deal with another country. Let's say Russia. They can't just go make a deal with Russia without, who we've been at odds with quite a bit, without the approval of Congress to make sure they're not abusing those powers. And again, the prevention of tyranny, because it's not all powerful. Okay, it's not all powerful what they can and cannot do. All right, so let's watch this really quick. What is the executive branch and what are their powers? And we'll do the rest of number 3. We should have time to get number 4 done as well.
3 branches of government in the U.S. legislative, executive, and judicial. The president heads the executive branch and has unique powers, including executive orders, vetoes, appointing federal judges, and appointing the heads of federal agencies, also known as the president's cabinet. He also acts as the commander-in-chief of the military. The cabinet, itself part of the executive branch, also acts as an advisory board to the president, with the chief executive of each agency, mostly known as the secretary of their department. But the president doesn't have absolute power to make these appointments. The Senate must vote to confirm the president's appointees, one example of the checks and balances at work. Cabinet members also make up part of the presidential line of succession in the event that the current president becomes incapacitated, resigns, dies, or is removed from office. First in line is the vice president, then the Speaker of the House, and then the Senate president pro tempore. After that, we start down the line of cabinet members. The president also appoints the heads of more than 50 independent federal commissions, as well as ambassadors and federal judges. Of course, those nominees need to be confirmed by the Senate as well. Check and balance. But the president also checks Congress. When Congress enacts bills, the president either signs the legislation into law or rejects it through a veto. The president also has the power to pardon and grant clemencies for federal crimes, except in cases of impeachment on both the state and federal level. In the global sphere, the president serves as the nation's representative. He can negotiate and sign treaties with another nation, but it only becomes ratified with the support of 2/3 of the Senate. The president also has the power to issue executive orders, which allows him to direct the actions of members of the executive branch without it having to be approved by Congress. But while Congress has no say when it comes to executive orders, the judicial branch, in the form of the Supreme Court, does have the power to overturn an executive order. But considering how much power the president is given, the eligibility requirements for the office of the presidency aren't very strict. The Constitution lists only 3 requirements. The president must be 35 years of age, a natural-born citizen, and must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. Presidents are limited to 2 4-year terms, as stipulated by the 22nd Amendment, ratified in 1951. Before that, 2 terms was traditionally the limit until President Franklin Delano Roosevelt served 4. In the U.S., we elect a new president every 4 years through a system called the Electoral College. This means when we go to the polls to vote for president, we actually vote for electors who will cast their vote on our behalf. While all of these rules or stipulations may sometimes befuddle us, they reflect how important maintaining a balance of power was to our founding fathers. So while the president's power has expanded as the United States has grown as a force on the world stage, the judicial and legislative branches still keep the leader of the free world in check.
Okay, so the president has a lot of power, but a lot of that power has to be approved by Congress, by the House and the Senate, right, in order for it to carry on. And so again, those checks and balances are really important. Let's review requirements to be president really quick. So age, so remember the House of Representatives, it was 25, Senate was 30, president 35. So again, kind of the more senior the position, We want to see people that are a little bit more mature, a little more life experience, which 35 still seems, I'm 40, 35 seems really young, you know, like, wow, like to run the country. You know, it says you need to have some life experience. You need to be a U.S. citizen. So this is born a U.S. citizen. So this is the one where it's limited that you can't be an immigrant. House of Representatives, Senate, you could be an immigrant, become a citizen, but for President of the United States, you have to have been born and a citizen your whole life, okay? And then actually resided here for 14 years. So they say that because what if you're born in the military or something like that? You know, so you've traveled around the world or maybe when you were younger. So they want to make sure that someone who has a lot of life experience within the country as well. So a citizen of that country born here, but also have a lot of life experience in that country, okay? In our country. Okay, let's look at the second part. What does Hamilton compare the presidency to? How are they different to those comparisons? So he compares the presidency to the King of England and the Governor of New York, where the king has unlimited power and needs approval. The president and governors are elected, okay? So a big part of setting up the executive branch was to try to show we need leadership, but it's not the same as a king. So there's a lot of comparisons written in some of the Federalist Papers to help people understand this new concept of a powerful position. Yes, it's powerful, but it's not the same as a monarchy. And here's how. And here's how we're going to make sure that they don't become a monarch, that they don't become just a for life, basically, dictator. So if we go to the checking for understanding, let's go over these questions. Alexander Hamilton argues in favor of a vigorous executive for the following, except. So that it would be able to enforce laws passed by Congress, that it would protect people's rights and liberties against faction and anarchy, and that it would help protect the country from foreign attack. The one exception is it would promote the separation of power. When Hamilton wrote for a need of unity in the executive, what does he mean? The presidency must consist of one person, not a pair or a group. So it's important to have a figurehead. It is important. Somebody needs to be in charge. Now, it doesn't mean that person's all powerful, but somebody does need to be in charge. It gives a sense of security. It gives a sense of leadership. And again, when dealing with an enemy, right, it puts a face to, you know, like speaking on behalf of the country. Every company, right, they have a CEO. So in a way, it's like the president's the CEO of our country. You know, someone ultimately needs to be in charge. Doesn't mean they're all powerful, but they do need to have more power than others. They need to represent and in very difficult times, step up to the plate and make those decisions. Act. Under what conditions may the president make treaties with foreign countries? And that is with the advice and consent of the Senate. So again, presidents represent us. They can speak on our behalf. They can make decisions, but they can't go into like legally binding treaties without the approval. So again, it is a very powerful position, but you do have to make sure you have the support of the elected body, right? The legislative and the legislative branch, the House and the Senate. So there's checks and balances so that power doesn't go too far. The president can be impeached, convicted, and removed from office for all the following except. So for high crimes, treason, and bribery, they cannot be removed for lying. So for example, in the 90s, President Clinton was impeached, but wasn't removed from office because he lied about two things. He lied about having an affair in the Oval Office, and he lied about doing recreational marijuana. So, because in the 90s, it was not cool. Like now, people don't really care. But back then, it was a big deal. So yeah, he lied 100%, but he couldn't be removed from office for lying. The president can issue pardons in all legal cases involving except. So they can do pardons for theft, for treason, for murder, impeachment though. And the reason for that is the people that can be impeached are like judges, people in executive positions, or themselves. So you want to make sure that they're not just protecting people that they're their friends or for their own self-interest. So the reason impeachment, they aren't able to pardon that is impeachment is specifically the federal government. So we can't have, it's kind of like the CEO of a company can protect their own people to protect themselves. So we got to make sure that those people are kept honest, right? And there could be a lot of bribery or issues if that wasn't the case. All right, let's go to the next one, all right, which is executive powers. So what are some of these powers? So in Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, it outlines specifically the roles, the enumerated, so the written, the implied powers that the president has, okay? They have the power of the sword, so to be commander-in-chief. Further, they give the president the ability to, to pardon. So to pardon people, that's a big deal. They're the only office that has that position, just like a governor does within a state. President also has the power to make treaties, though it has to be confirmed. Further entrusting the president with appointing ambassadors, commissions, officers, judges, okay? So they do have a lot of power to influence positions and place people that align with their political ideology, with their political beliefs. What are 4 of the most significant powers of the presidency? Explain your reasoning for what. So 1 is commander-in-chief, so that's over the military, okay? The president can reprieve and pardon people. They can appoint chief diplomats and ambassadors. That's the first part of number 4. And stuff, let's see. They can, as chief executive, they have the power to appoint people to high government positions in courts and agencies. Though they do need the approval of the Senate for that. But the Senate can't appoint people. The president gets to appoint. So that's very powerful. How is the president's power shaped the American people how do the president's powers shape what the American people want from the president? When they want national protection, they look to the president. When they want certain laws or they want changes in laws, they look to the president. Even though the president can't declare war, the president can't pass laws, the president can influence Congress, right? Can say, these are the laws we want, this is what I want, and can use that to negotiate to try to push legislative through. If there's a military issue or something like that, they can use that influence to encourage Congress to engage or to negotiate, or I'm going to draw up a treaty. So they kind of set the stage, and Congress then most of the time will follow or work together to do this, but they set the stage. It's like the HR department. That's who we go and we complain to. And we hold them accountable for it. Okay, let's do the checking for understanding and we'll be done. We've done great with timing today, so this is really good. We'll be set up in a good spot for tomorrow. The president plays all these roles except, so they are commander-in-chief over the military, head of state for negotiation, and they help with policy making because remember, they can veto or they can sign it. They are not chief over the economy. That is the legislative branch because they have the power of the purse. The constitutional term presidential power is most likely readily limited by the checks and balances from Congress and the court. So again, for example, the president has the power of executive order. So for an example, we'll look at a recent one. The president did the executive order on student loans. The courts ruled that they didn't have the authority to do that. All right. So sometimes presidents overstep. All right. Doesn't mean that the people didn't like the idea. Doesn't mean it couldn't pass through Congress, but they overstep their authority. So there's certain things they can do and then there's certain things they can't. So the courts and Congress are there to help keep them in check if and when those executive orders or something go too far or are found to be in violation of what is within their power versus other lanes of power. One of the president's key formal powers over Congress is the veto, which requires 2/3 majority in both chambers to override. So though the president can't make laws, the president has a lot of influence to veto, which could waste a whole bunch of time for Congress. So Congress has the initiative to try to pass laws that will likely be signed. What's the point of passing it if the president says, I'm going to veto it? Because getting 2/3 is almost impossible. Getting 50% is hard enough. So 2/3 is almost impossible in the House and the Senate. So reading this excerpt, how can a president fire an official he or she has appointed to the executive position? So let's say they nominate someone, Secretary of State, which is the chief military diplomat, right? Goes around the world and negotiates with powers that we're at odds with. And let's say the president gets mad because they overstep or they don't align or they argue with them. It's an at-will position, so the president can literally fire anyone at any time. If they don't like a judge, if they don't like a person in the executive branch, if they don't like, gone, bye. So they do have a lot of power for the people that they nominate that they can replace them and put somebody else in there. All right. Yes. And that can be good and bad. You know what I mean? And stuff. But again, there are a lot of powers. So there's limitations, but there is a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of wiggle room that the president can get away with. Okay. All right. So we did really good on our timing today. We got through our first 4 questions. Okay. So we looked at what our supporting question is. What are the powers, limitations, roles of the president? So we went over some of those powers, some of the limitations. We're going to continue to discuss that. We went over our 5 key vocab terms. Okay. And then kind of talking about the shaping of the presidency, how it's meant to be in charge, but not a monarchy. And we have to limit those powers because we don't want another dictator. All right. And then going over some of those powers, right? Commander in chief over the military, the ability to negotiate, appoint positions, approve laws. So there are quite a few things. Okay. And then we'll pick up from here tomorrow when we meet. Okay. And so we'll work on this a little bit more, looking at the powers and the limitations of the executive branch, which is headed by the president. And then we will review your project. Okay. Which is the superhero project. All right. Which is kind of having some fun with the executive branch and then taking a little bit further. Okay. So give me a thumbs up. You got 1 through 4 done. 1 through 4. We're good. Make sure you saved it on your Google Drive. Okay. And so that tomorrow when we come to class, we'll just open it right up. We'll do 5, 6, and 7. And then we'll spend the rest of the time talking about the project. Okay. Have a wonderful day. You all are so awesome. Thank you for being on track and helping me out today. I really appreciate it. Okay. Any questions before we go?